Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on Ace of the Diamond Act 2, episodes 33 through 35, and I've talked for over an hour the last two sets about these episodes because they're just so good. They're just this series, we were talking about it in the comments on YouTube for episodes, I think 26 through 28, and just the idea that this series, that it just rewards, the writer rewards you as the reader. Like, you have made it through like 200 episodes, now you're getting rewarded. And I did have something about that with Sawamura, comparing him to another sports anime protagonist. I did want to talk about that, but I think I'm going to save it till the end of the discussion. I put a little note here to talk about at the end, and one thing that I love about Ace of the Diamond. So that'll be at the end of the discussion if I remember it. But I actually did have some comments from YouTube and Patreon that I did want to address before we move into these episodes specifically. Muthriyaz Ahmed talked about, I know I'm going to be reading the manga once I'm all caught up in the next month or so, and was talking about how a volume of Diamond No Ace or Ace of the Diamond is basically 9 chapters, and usually an episode is 3 chapters, so it would be like watching 3 episodes, reading a volume. I was like, oh, that's cool. So basically me reading a volume is going to be like me sitting down and watching this set of 3 episodes. That works out pretty well, so awesome. I'm glad to know that. Kelsey sadly burst my bubble on Discord and said that Mima is not in the same region as Mei and Miyuki, so he won't be at the Invitational. My fanfiction dreams are gone. My fanfiction dreams of Miyuki being able to troll Mima from the Invitational tournament is not going to happen, which is very sad. So, thanks for bringing me back to reality, Kelsey. But that's all right. I still, while he's at the training tournament, I'm sure Miyuki will text Mima and just tell him all he's missing, and he's gonna be like, right? Because will Kosei be there? I don't know for sure. And then Killer Queen talked about how Furuya and Sawamura have come into the ace role from different perspectives. And I really liked this in that you have Sawamura, who has worked his way from the ground up and has clawed his way to get where he's been. And he's had to work and practice and like do his training schedule and everything. And then so him coming into the ace position possibly is a different perspective than Furuya, who as a first year was just given this role and been like, okay, now make it work. And Furuya in that regard has done fine up until when he's hit a wall now. So I honestly feel like Sawamura was in the better position all along to get to this point because he had to work his way up and he had to learn the fundamentals and he had to practice all those and learn to walk before running. And Furuya was just kind of told, okay, now run. You know how to walk, right? So that part's interesting. I think that coming from that perspective, it makes me feel a little bit sad for Furuya because it's like, oh yeah, you thought that you were just put into this position and you thought you had a handle on it, and now you've hit like a wall and you've got to move over it. It's like, ooh. And that kind of ties to Shaylee and Ivan Perez Hernandez's comments. I like that Shaylee did bring up that it's not really one person's fault. It's not. It's kind of responsibility for everybody involved. And that the idea is that, so I did kind of focus on how the coaches need to be helping Furuya. I still stand by that. Shaylee was like, well, there's a lot of people on the team. I'm like, yeah, but your ace is your number 1 player out of all of them. They're the ones you should give the most attention to if they're the ones that are anchoring your team. That's just part of it. I've coached teams before, not for baseball, but I've coached in other things. And I'm like, yeah, if they're your top player, they deserve some attention. But here's the thing Shaylee pointed out, and I liked this, is that Sato's style of coaching, I'm a communications major. So my major's in English and communications. So talking is important, and I preach it all day long, but that's not everybody's style. And Sato is not a, let's sit down and talk about this team. Katioka's philosophy is very much like, you figure it out and we'll kind of guide you, but we're not going to sit down and have powwows with you every weekend. That's not their style. And I'm glad you pointed that out, Shaylee. And that kind of ties to Ivan Perez Hernandez's thing about the notebooks being that main form of communication. Katioka has a very hands-off approach where he's like, he wants the players to, realize things for themselves and to figure it out for themselves. And I do admire that. And feel like that's a good learning lesson for a young adult going into adulthood, to be able to figure things out for yourself and work through things, because you're not always going to have that adult figure there to coach you through life. I get that, and I'm all about it. for me personally, my own opinion is if I were coaching the team and I knew that Furuya was struggling so much, I would want to sit down with him and like talk, but even if he's introverted, I'd be like, okay, you can communicate anything with me and I want you to, here's some suggestions, but we've seen that Furuya doesn't really always listen to those very well. But I do like that, Shaylee, you pointed out that Sawamura was kind of in the same boat. So treating our players equally, when Sawamura had the yips, Katioka didn't sit down and talk with him. They let him work through it. So now Furuya is having the exact same thing happen to him. So I'm glad you pointed that out. My own personal bias, I'm like, oh, if it were me, I would do this, but I'm not Katioka, fortunately. So yeah, I thought that was a really good thing to bring up. So I'm glad you all brought that up with those comments. Those were all really great. But I'm excited to see in this set of episodes what ends up happening. It seems like, anytime I go into Ace of the Diamond anymore, I just don't have any expectations. I'm like, let's just roll the dice and see where they land, because that's usually when it turns out to be the best, when I don't know what's going to happen. And we're getting close to that invitational tournament. I've been really hyped about it. I don't know if we'll get to it in this set of episodes or not, but I'm pretty excited. So we've wasted enough time. I'm going to talk one more thing about a few things at the end here, but we'll save that for the end of the discussion. So thank you all so much for the comments and the kind words. Thank you guys for watching this reaction and discussion, but let's not waste any more time. I'm excited to get into some Ace of the Diamond this morning. So let's do this, shall we? We're going to start episodes 33 through 35 of Ace of the Diamond Act 2 here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh. I've taken more notes with this set of episodes than I think I have the entire series. I've got I keep getting more notes. It's like a whole full page front and back and then a whole side page. These episodes, Terajima, the mangaka, it's so great because now Terajima, we've talked about this with all the seasons, is that once we get to this third season, the very first season, if you're somebody like me who came into this knowing nothing about baseball, I started this series a year ago knowing nothing about baseball, zilch, nada, having no interest in the sport whatsoever. And so the first season, it really walks you through everything. It's like, here's all the positions, here's how the dynamics work, here's the gameplay strategy. Season 1 proves to you that baseball is not just people hitting a ball with a wooden stick. It proves to you that it is a dynamic sport that has all these intricacies. And then season 2 is like, okay, now that you know how baseball works, and we have our main first years and our third years are gone, now we're going to show you what happens when there's a transition period and your third years leave and the first years are now second years and they have to pick up the pieces and start a new dynamic with a new team. The second season was all just about that, and about Sawamura's struggles, him dealing with him at his lowest point and clawing his way back to the top. And now that we're in Act 2, it's all about, okay, now these players are crawling their way to the top. What do we do with these characters and their complexities, their relationships with one another? This whole set of episodes, oh my gosh. We're not even through the whole training camp, and it's already like feeding my soul. I'm just like, yes, please. Yes, please. So we've got a lot to get through on this. I'm trying to think. I took a lot of notes with episode 35 and a lot of notes to episode 33. 34 probably had the least notes, but God, these episodes were great. So yeah, episode 33 is heat transfer. All right. May 24th. So we basically run through a whole week. This set of episodes runs through an entire week. May 24th to May 30th up to June 1st. Is where they run through. So May 24th, I love that now, I like that the one team is saying, we can't ignore Sawamura now. They're like, we not just have to worry about Furuya, we now have to worry about Sawamura as a pitcher as well. Again, our Sunshine Boy getting acknowledged. I love it. And it's Hino versus Sato. It's 0-1 when episode 33 starts. I like Miyuki saying that Sawamura, he's like, Miyuki's lamenting the fact that the numbers aren't perfect. He's like, they're off. They're not perfect. He's like, it's fun. It's fun because it's unexpected and it's a challenge. Miyuki likes a challenge. He's like, it's fun, but it's also kind of annoying because things aren't going his way. But he's like, if we have any trouble with the numbers, the accuracy of the fastball that Sawamura has is something we can depend on. And that's such a thing. The fact that Miyuki is like, we can depend on Sawamura's fastball for accuracy. Back in season 1, that was Sawamura's worst thing. He's like, okay, you're not a fast pitcher, but you've got this crazy trajectory, so maybe we can work with that. Now the fact that Sawamura has a fastball we can work with, it's like, what? The fact that our boy has grown so much, it's amazing. And Ochi is noticing that Sawamura is becoming more polished, and that the more he wants to pitch more, the more teams that he pitches against that are strong, the more polished and better he gets. Like, Ochi is taking note. He's like, okay, it's a pleasant surprise, right? And here's the thing. Sawamura has this moment in the beginning of episode 33 that is very much, it reminds me of how he and Furuya are very similar in that he's like, I want to pitch more. I want to pitch more. And it's like, that's exactly Furuya's stance. The difference is Sawamura says, I want to pitch more against other ace pitchers and compete against other ace pitchers. We haven't seen Furuya get to that point yet. Furuya's not thinking about pitching against other pitchers. He just wants to pitch more and lead his team to victory. Sawamura is thinking about the competition and who else is he going to pitch against and other dynamics. But at the core, both he and Furuya want to pitch more. Like, they're very similar in that regard. So that was a really cool moment. I liked that. Furuya and Koshu, I love that conversation. God, Furuya! I'm so happy Furuya has like taken a turn for the better. Thank goodness. I'm glad that Furuya is communicating more. Him and Yui and Koshu, they've helped out his relationship. Ono, Furuya has like the comfort blanket roommate system. It's like Ono and Yui are like support systems. They're like, come on, Furuya, we will lift you up. Yui and Ono are amazing for that. And Furuya is really lucky to have them as roommates, especially that they're catchers for him. Like, that's really, really good. But yeah, Furuya is saying that he views Sawamura as an inspiration. He's like, and for Furuya to recognize that Sawamura has worked his way towards the top, it's so good for his character, because he's like Sawamura's inspiration. He's gone from his lowest point back to being amazing here. Like, this set of episodes, Furuya and Sawamura acknowledge that each other are awesome. They're both great. And they establish why they are rivals with one another. Furuya's like, he's amazing and he's an inspiration and I want to beat him. And by the end of episode 35, Sawamura was like, Furuya's awesome and that's what makes me want to beat him. Like, that rivalry between them, it's so good. And it's so, I'm going to be honest, we're going to get into talk about Haikyuu in this, because I was thinking about it rewatching episodes 32 through 34. Or 30 through 32. I was rethinking about Haikyuu. And I want to talk a little bit about it at the end. But I will say that one thing that always got me was that the rivalry between, if you've ever read Haikyuu or watched it, the rivalry between Kageyama and Hinata, it's kind of like if Sawamura and Miyuki had a rivalry. And volleyball is a totally different sport than baseball. But there's never really, the whole series, you're just waiting for, it's kind of like, Kageyama and Hinata is kind of the same thing as Miyuki and Sawamura. You're just waiting for Miyuki to... Here's the thing. Miyuki has acknowledged Sawamura. Sawamura just doesn't get it. He thinks he's joking. But in Haikyuu, you're just waiting for Kageyama to acknowledge Hinata, and it eventually gets there. But as a rivalry, I never viewed really Kageyama and Hinata so much as a rivalry, or if it is, because they're not competing for the same position, right? Even in series like Slam Dunk, they're not competing for the same position, right? They're playing different roles. Here, it literally is two pitchers competing against each other to be the top pitcher. And so it's a different dynamic. And I love the rivalry between Furuya and Sawamura and how it develops over the series. And we're at the point where they both respect each other so much. And Furuya's like, I don't want to lose, but I respect Sawamura so much. And then you have Koshu, who's like, I'm in the same boat. I don't want to lose to Miyuki. I want to be top catcher. So I like that bonding moment between Koshu and Furuya, that he understands. He's like, I understand you, Furuya, and I want to help you. I like that. I like the Koshu's like, I want to help you, Furuya, the best that I can. And so, yeah, we get Tojo pitching. They end up winning 7-1. I love the audience saying, let's keep an eye on Tojo. I'm like, Tojo getting recognized as a pitcher. It feels great. And then, yeah, Furuya pitching in the second string game. I noticed the crowd's like, why is Furuya pitching in the second string? And it's like, well, and they don't want to say he's had an injury, obviously, but them noticing that. And then setting up the pitcher. I like that Koshu is showing that he's a strategist, very much like Miyuki. He's a strategist, constantly thinking about what calls to make, things like that. But he says, don't, what's it say? Going by the ears. My handwriting is awful. So I'm trying to think, don't insult. Okay, so I like that at the end of one of the innings, Koshu, he had been telling Furuya the different pitches that he wants, and Furuya made him stop and was like, no. He's like, I want to pitch outside. And in that moment, I really like that because I've said throughout this series that Furuya is simple. And in this set of episodes, we finally see, because Furuya is finally communicating to the other catchers and the other players, Furuya's not, I mean, he may still be simple, but he is thinking about the plays. He's following Ochiai and Katioka's advice and viewing the game in a new perspective, and he's picking up on things and learning about the plays and the different situations that these players are being put in and what do they do in those situations. And Furuya is thinking a lot like Sawamura and like other players, and I love that. And I love that Koshu realizes, he's like, I'm insulting Miyuki. He's like, I'm insulting Furuya as the ace by asking for these easy pitches when he wants to challenge and get back in the game. He's looking forward and thinking of playing in the future. I don't need to insult him by asking for pitches that don't recognize his strength. And I was like, that's really cool. I liked that moment a lot. And so the catchers, the way that they talk, Koshu shows he's very similar to Miyuki. Very similar. And then I love that little glove bump that him and Furuya give at the end there. That was really great. So they win again. I feel like Yui was an interesting character to watch throughout these episodes because he seemed like he was getting fired up and inspired watching Koshu, watching Ono, getting Furuya to actually catch with him finally. I love that in this set of episodes, Yui and Furuya finally get the catch for each other, and so do Sawamura and Koshu. It seems like it was meant to be. You know, it seems like it just all, the stars aligned in this great way. But yeah, I love that Yui is a focus in these set of episodes, showing that he's kind of going through this period of growth as well and realizing stuff about himself too. And then I like that they say that Sato makes it look easy, but that just shows how much work they've put in. Like, yeah, Sato makes it look like it's so easy, but we know as the audience that there's a lot more to it than that. And that's really good. So yeah, so the team with their notebook goals, we go through all of that. And then we cut to May 25th, where they're at 15 straight wins at this point, which is really cool. Nori pitches for 9 innings. He pitches for 9 innings in a couple games in this set of series. I was like, yes. I was like, Nori Kawakami getting to pitch for a full 9 innings. Like, my dude. I love it. We're going to talk about Nori through this, but doing 132 pitches. And I love that Miyuki's like, you have the same passion on the mound as you always have. And this, Miyuki's like, it may not sound much coming from me, because we've established Miyuki as kind of like, I feel like Miyuki, of all of the pitchers, Miyuki had the least connection with Tamba. Miyuki and Tamba just didn't really care for each other, and Miyuki was just kind of working with him because he had to. But I feel like Miyuki really gravitates towards Furuya and Sawamura, and so we don't really know if he has a relationship with Kawashima or Kaneda. But with Nori, I feel like he's like, I want to have a good battery with you, but we're just not the most compatible, but we make it work sort of thing. I feel like Ono and Kawakami have the best battery compatibility, but he's like, it may not seem like much coming from me, but you've become reliable and you are an ace of our generation. I love that he's like, even if you won't be the ace at this current tournament coming up, the summer tournament, he's like, for all of us third years, you're our ace. And I'm like, oh, that was so sweet. I love that. Because yeah, Nori is like, Nori never complains. He never complains, never whines about not being the ace. He's always been like a constant support throughout his entire high school career. And I love that. I love that he's just like, I'm here to do what I need to do. And it's like, I just freaking love it. So yeah, they've won 17 games in a row at this point, and then we kind of get a hint of who's coming. So we get that the American team is bringing 18 players from Los Angeles. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Hirohata from Yakushi, which is surprising. They say it's surprising they sent Hirohata instead of Sanada. But honestly, there's enough pitchers there. You've got Mei, you've got Shunshin, you've got Umemiya, you've got a couple others, I believe. So there's enough pitchers there. And honestly, it's funny. I don't know if Sanada's attitude would really... Sanada is so laid back and chill that even though he's really taken it upon himself to get better this third year, like he's really like pushed the envelope for what he's with his own passion towards baseball, I feel like, I don't know, I don't think Sanada's personality, I think he just sits on the sidelines like Raizo and be like, what are we doing, guys? We'll talk about Umemiya, but I just don't know. I feel like this guy... Hirohata, he seems like he's more eager to learn and get better, right? So that's interesting. It seems like Kunitomo has picked players based on either they're the best of the best on their team or they're players that have lots of potential and could get really good. So Hirohata might be one of them. It's funny seeing somebody from Yakushi that's not like intensely animated or overly eccentric like Sanada or Raichi. It's funny that we see this guy who's pretty straight-laced from Yakushi. It's a fun time. We find out from Inui. I'm glad Inui, or Ducktail as the Americans call him, he gets to come. And then Hoshida comes from Ichidai 3rd. He's our guy from there. Sad that Amahisa, but again, Amahisa's kind of like Sanada. The pitchers, I don't feel like Amahisa would get a lot of out of this training camp. I feel like the whole time he'd like be sitting there being like reciting poetry. I don't feel like he needs it. Right? And since they're on Inishiro's home turf, it makes sense that they bring 4 players. So we got that one guy. I don't know his name. The one guy that with the dark hair that's super polite to Miyuki. It's like, oh wow, a player from Inishiro that's not a diva? What? But then you have Mei, Shirakawa, of course, because we have to have some edge to this, and Carlos, because it's Carlos, right? So I like that a lot. But Ochiai, talking about Kunitomo and them. So Ochiai is making a point of Mei pitching to Miyuki, being like, you need to catch some of Mei's pitches, and like, you go undercover, be a double agent, scout out for the team. We're going to face Inishiro this summer, probably. So, and I like when they're like, don't get injured. And instantly Kateoka's like, I was like, don't you put this evil on us, Ochiai. Don't you get him injured. No, we don't need Miyuki injured. No, thank you. But it seems like everything's fine. Thank goodness. It seems like Miyuki does not get an injury. Glad. But Furuya's recovering well. I love seeing Sawamura was at the doctor with Furuya. That's the thing. Sawamura and Furuya have this friendship, this rivalry that's become a friendship. And the fact that Sawamura went to the doctor with Furuya to make sure he was okay. I mean, he does want to beat Furuya at his best, but it's like their friendship. I'm like, oh. And we'll talk about like him and them going to see Miyuki off. Like, it's just so freaking sweet. I love that so much. But yeah, so Yui catching for Furuya, finally. I'm glad we get that. And then Koshu admits to Seto that he is scared of Furuya's pitches. He's like, he was more intense than I anticipated. And it cuts to Sawamura being like, it's much different on the field than it is the bullpen. It's like, oh. So Koshu's like, it took all I had in 3 innings to keep up with him. He's like, I'm not ready to take Miyuki's spot. I love that. I love Koshu's self-awareness that he's like, I'm not ready to be the starting catcher like Miyuki. He's like, I'm not. It was a wake-up call. And I think Miyuki wanted him to be on the first string to help get him aware of what was going to be expected of him. Because I fully anticipate Ono's graduating, Miyuki's graduating, Kariba I don't think is ready to be the starting catcher. Yui is not ready. So I think of all of them, Miyuki's like, look, Koshu's gonna be, he's got the most potential. And Miyuki's like, he's the most like me, you know? So I think Miyuki recognizes that Koshu could be the starting catcher, but he needs experience. He needs maturity. He needs to realize what he's stepping into. And he's like, put him on the first string and make him realize that. And he will get better. Because Miyuki's like, because I got better, right? So it's just kind of like Miyuki knows from his experience that Koshu can change the same way too. And so I love that Koshu's like, Furuya and Sawamura, they naturally expect the catcher to catch their pitches. And Miyuki has been that constant anchor to be like, yes, you pitch, I'll catch, no problem. And Koshu's like, I was not anticipating the intensity and the emotions these pitchers are pouring into their pitches. He's like, I've got work to do. If I'm going to get up to Miyuki's level, I've got work to do. And he kind of expressed that to Sawamura later when he's like, I'm only on the first string till Miyuki comes back. It's like, oh, like Koshu he realizes he's not there yet. Right? He's not at Miyuki's level. And so that's so good. And so then I like that Sato and Okamura, they join the first string, and then Miyuki likens Koshu to being like him. And I like that Miyuki's like, he's thorny, but he's got a lot of potential. He's a good communicator. And I like in this moment where he's like, so you admit that you were thorny too, right? You were cheeky. And the manager's like, you were cheeky to those third years. And Miyuki's like, I like that it's a nice reminder that Miyuki has changed so much since the start of this series. Like, I think back to season 1 when Miyuki was like tricking Sawamura into getting there late and everything. Like, he was being a troll. Like, Miyuki was such a trickster. And thinking back to how Miyuki like would literally tick off the upperclassmen just to get a rise out of them. Like, he was such a prankster. And him becoming captain, Tetsu was right. It was the best thing that could happen to him. giving him that responsibility and that being a leader. And we'll talk about Tetsu. I was not expecting that. I was like, oh my God. I was not expecting that at all. But yeah, just Miyuki being like, wow. I feel like Miyuki and Sawamura are similar, and then Miyuki's like, wow, let's not talk about first year Miyuki or second year Miyuki anymore. And then Sawamura's the same way about him being a first year. It's really cute. But then we have Yui's expression looking at Koshu as he bows to Sawamura. I don't say that Miyuki is, I don't think that Yui is jealous of Koshu. I don't think that's it. I think that Yui is frustrated and inspired and like, okay, Koshu's catching up. He's gonna push to be the starting catcher. Yui's like, do I still want to be starting catcher? What do I need to do to also get to the same level as Koshu? Because I think they both realize Miyuki is gonna leave in a couple months and they need to be ready for that. But taming the wolf! Sawamura taming this wolf bowing to Sawamura and saying, you can catch for me now. And Sawamura's like, okay, cool, great. We may do it tomorrow, probably not. But I love that just as Furuya gets to the point where he can let Yui catch for him, now Koshu realizes that he needs to practice more with Furuya and Sawamura. He needs to practice with them to get up to Miyuki's level. So he's like, okay, I'll let you catch. I'll catch for you, Sawamura. And Sawamura's like, great. Knew it all along. Was ready for it from the start. It's like, oh my God. And that was episode 33. That was one of 3. Oh my God. So yeah, then we have episode 34, which is competition. And I do feel bad when Koshu says, Sawamura's like, you finally made it. You made it to first string. And Koshu's like, well, only while Miyuki's away. It's like he just is still doubting himself just a bit. He doesn't, I will say this, Koshu and Miyuki are very similar, but I can't ever imagine Koshu bowing, or I can't ever imagine Miyuki bowing to someone like Koshu bows to Sawamura. Like Miyuki would never bow to Sawamura. I don't see it. No. Maybe in an alternate universe, if Miyuki was the first year and Sawamura was the second year, maybe there's that AU where the dynamics would be a little bit different. But as an upperclassman, I don't feel like Miyuki would ever bow to anyone, much less Sawamura. So him and Koshu are a bit different. They're not entirely the same creature, which is good. That's a good thing. And so we get to May 30th, where they have the meetup. Koshu's impressions of Sawamura and Miyuki are still amazing. They're great. I love that Sawamura's smile gets bigger and bigger, and Miyuki just, you can't see through his glasses. It's so good. I want a screenshot of that. I'll go back and get it. But Sato has 4 teams to play. And so they're going to rotate pitchers and catchers through all 4 of those games. And at this point, we've got basically only a couple weeks until the roster is filled. So Kataoka is like, now's the time. If you're going to prove yourself as a player, now's the time to do it, because this is going to determine the roster. This is the final push to see who's going to make the starting lineup. And it's so good. I love that Miyuki's like, learn all you can, Koshu. And Koshu's like, okay. And so, oh my God, Sawamura and Furuya seeing Miyuki off. I could have watched a whole episode just on that. Because where do we even start? Because you have one, Miyuki and Kuromochi, them going to the classroom. All the third year girls are like, oh, Kuromochi and Miyuki, they always hang out with each other. They're best friends. And Sawamura, I love Sawamura being like, is this the third year room? I've never been in a third year room before. And all the girls are like, who are you? And they know both of them. That's a really good thing, because at first they're like, oh, that's Furuya that played at the Invitational. And the other girl's like, oh, that's Sawamura that was in the newspaper. So they're both getting recognition, which is great. But they show up at Miyuki's desk, and I love that Sawamura calls him Cap. That's his nickname. He's like, hey, Cap. And the girls are like, oh, Cap. Miyuki-kun is Cap? What? Like, they're going to hold this over his head for so long. And Miyuki's like, I need you to leave. But I love that they came together. Sawamura and Furuya came together as friends to see him off because they both care about Miyuki. It's like, oh, and I love that they give him all of the, what product placement? Like, Haichu must have gave a nice little endorsement to Madhouse, being like, can you just, like, promote our candy maybe in this one episode? Because they just, like, what a promotion, right? I've had a Haichu once. It's fine. I'm not a fan. I'm like, I'm not a big candy person, though. I have a sweet tooth, but not for candy. I'm like, it's more like cakes and pies than candy. I'm like, candy is just kind of eh. But I love that they do the haiku. They're like, all the MLB guys have this. Here you go, Miyuki. And they just give them like all bags of it. And the girls are like, ooh, getting all this candy from an underclassman, Miyuki. And I love that Miyuki's like, I'm going to be gone for 72 hours. Miyuki's like, I'm going to be gone for 3 days. And you guys are acting like I'm going to be gone for a month. It's a weekend. I'm gone a weekend and I'll be back. But that's how much Miyuki means to them. That's how much Miyuki means as their captain. He's like, you're our captain, you're our anchor. Like, without you there, we're going to have to put in overtime. So he's like, it just shows how valuable Miyuki is to the team and how much Sawamura and Furuya respect him and look up to him. It's so, so good. But everybody wants to know if he's going to pitch to Mei. Everybody's like me. They're like, are you going to pitch to Mei? And we'll talk about that. I was wrong. We'll talk about this. We'll get to that. But I'll admit I was wrong, but we'll talk about that there. And then Zono, I like that Zono shows up and then Sawamura calls him young boss. He's like, young boss. And Zono's like, why am I young boss? Like, I love it. But I like the idea that Kuromochi, like, Sawamura is gushing. And the whole time the girls are like talking about their nicknames, you can see Sawamura in the background just talking nonstop. And Miyuki's just like, God. And then Furuya's like, here you go. And Furuya sees him off too. But I like that Kuromochi says, raise hell while you're gone. We'll do the same. It's like Kuromochi has the badass one-liners. It's like, yes. And I love Miyuki just gives him that look like, okay, BFF. Got it. Like, I love Kuromochi and Miyuki as best friends. I love that. And then Zono and Sawamura, they cheer him off being like, bonsai! Like, it's so cute. Freaking adorable. I love it. So we cut back to the actual practice game of them getting there. Umemiya showing up. Umemiya is the wild card. I'll talk about this later in my notes, but he's like the wild card. He's like the one player that's there that's kind of chaotic. He's talented, and that's why he's there, and has lots of potential, but he's like the chaos factor, and we'll talk about him. But Inui being there, and Inui, of course, the moment Miyuki like walks up the hill at the very top in like total shonen manner is there all for the Inashiro players. Just what? I love that we have that Mei has that shitty grin like, hey Kazuya, what's up? Carlos is kind of cheeky, like, oh, hey, fancy seeing you actually show up on campus. Shirakawa is angsty and edgelord. And then the one guy that we don't know his name is like, welcome to Inashiro. Just, we're a team of divas. I'm sorry you have to put up with this. Like, it's just, that's so great. But Kunitomo, we'll talk about Kunitomo. His greeting and him sponsoring the tournament, making Inui the captain. I like that. That's very fitting. Inui he's 40. But he's very mature. Inui is very mature because he's an undercover student. He's an adult playing an undercover student. No, not really. But he's very mature and he's very calm and level-headed. So it makes sense that he's the captain, right? But Hoshida's there for Ichidai. Shunshin! I got so excited because Shunshin forming a battery with Miyuki, it's been something I've wanted since season 1. That's where I was wrong. I have built up this entire invitational tournament to be like, I can't wait for Mei and Miyuki to form a battery. Can't wait for that. By the end of these episodes, I didn't care about Mei and Miyuki. I was like, Tetsu's here, Shunshin and Miyuki are forming a battery. It's something I've wanted since season 1. And I'm so glad you all, back a year ago, didn't spoil me. I'm so glad. Back a year ago, I was like, oh, I would love to see Miyuki and Shunshin be a battery together. And y'all were like crickets, like just, like, we're not going to tell Romania that it's going to happen in season 3. I'm so glad y'all didn't spoil me for that, because this was one of the best moments, is seeing, it's like, it's not fan service. That's the thing. It's not just like a fan service game that was thrown out of the blue. This is literally part of training, part of that. It's part of the canon. It makes sense. And it's so rewarding as a viewer to finally get to see some things come to fruition. Like, I freaking love it. But yeah, so Miyuki playing first base, that's crazy. Like, he's playing first base. And Kelsey was talking about this in the comments in the Discord. But the idea, because I think, Kelsey, you're talking about the third baseman thing in your comment as well. But the idea is, and I don't know the intricacies of baseball quite fully like someone that plays, but she's a player and was talking about how the third baseman has a lot more has a lot more to worry about. Like last set of episodes, Furuya was third baseman, and he was constantly like, because your players often hit straight to the third baseman. So of course Furuya was on edge. But Kelsey was saying how your first baseman has more rules that they have to abide by, but they don't get as many hits towards them. So it makes perfect sense why Miyuki would play that position, because Miyuki is smart and can strategize and has the know-how to know all the rules of the first baseman role and play it well. But since he's never played any other position in baseball at all except for catcher, you don't want to put Miyuki in a position where he would be totally out of his comfort zone. But first baseman seems like a safe choice. Like him and Inoue are first baseman. That's a safe choice for players that I feel have only been catchers in the past. That's crazy. I love it a lot. But I like they established that some players had to drop out due to injuries coming here. So it ties that Sato's not the only one that has injuries. I know we dog Sato a lot because they have so many injuries, but it is realistic. And I like that other teams we established have had injuries of their own and have had to have players not come. So I imagine like if Furuya had been selected for this invitational tournament and training camp, then he wouldn't have come because of his injury. So that's good to know. Mei just nagging from the sidelines. Mei just being like, come on, do this, do that. He's so much like Sawamura. So much like him. Has that same energy. It's just, instead of Sawamura being like a total optimistic ray of sunshine, Mei is a diva ray of sunshine. Mei is just like constantly in your face the same way as Sawamura. It's just in a different tone. I love it. I freaking love it. But yeah, Umemiya has quite the animosity with Mei. And by the end of it, Umemiya is calling him king, which I assume that Umemiya, for him, it's more of an insult. It's more mocking him than considering him the actual king pitcher. But I forgot, yeah, Umemiya and Ugamori, they're the entire reason why Inashiro did not go forward in the fall tournament. So Mei is a grudge holder. Let it be known, Mei holds a grudge. And he's like, I don't like you. And Umemiya is like, well, I don't like you either. And everybody's just like, what do we do? And Mei constantly nags at Umemiya for his form and how he's not pitching up to his standards. But Shunshin is up to everyone's standards. I could not sing enough praises for the fact that Shunshin gets so much screen time and so much praise in these episodes. Like, our boy deserves it. I'm so sad that he cannot play this year. But the way that he talked, I'm like, is Shunshin thinking about maybe going overseas and playing in the International League Pro? Would he maybe go to the MLB? Shunshin's talented enough, he could do it. He could absolutely play pro overseas. I have no doubt. But I feel like maybe that's what he's aiming for, because he's trying to figure out like how the American teams do things a little bit differently and kind of play around that. So that's interesting. But yeah, Shunshin getting the recognition he deserves. And for Mei to call Shunshin's pitch perfect, if Mei compliments you, that's high praise. That's like the highest praise. It's like if the king compliments you, it's pretty high praise. And Shunshin gets it like instantly. So I think that says a lot. And I love that as they're all arguing, Carlos is like, man, we have a lot of level-headed players here. Like, just king of Mei may be the king of pitching, but Carlos is the king of sarcasm. And I love it. So Inoue gets to catch for Naramiya, which is like pretty much the most balanced battery, I feel, and we'll talk about that. And then Shunshin gets to catch for Miyuki gets to catch for Shunshin. My dreams are coming true. I love it. I feel like we are going to get to hear about Miyuki catching for Mei. We are going to get to hear about it. It's going to come back, but it's going to be later on, like in the next set of episodes, because they're going to save that for right before the summer tournament. I have a feeling they're going to save that little nugget of information for right before we start. I feel like that's going to wait. But yeah, Inoue commenting about how basically Mei is a lot like Mukai. Inoue's like, oh, I can catch for Mei. He's a lot like Mukai. They have the same personalities. I'm like, that's where it is. Yeah, Inoue has no trouble catching for Mei because it's just like him catching for Mukai. They're very similar. Very good to note. I like that Miyuki breaks down Kunitomo's strategy. That Kunitomo's like, we're only here for 3 days. So rather than developing this complex system of calls and signs, let's just focus on the fundamentals and getting things precise and clear and clarified, have clarity and precision. And Miyuki's like, that's how Kunitomo coaches, with specific, precise clarity, and he gets his players excited. He's a lot like Kataoka, but more experienced, because we've established Kataoka's been coaching for maybe 6 or 7 years. He's not the most experienced coach out there. And Kunitomo's been coaching for a long time. So I feel like Kataoka is the less polished, refined version of Kunitomo. Kunitomo is like a well-oiled machine at this point. He knows exactly what he wants from his players. He knows how to articulate that and how to be a commanding presence as a coach. Like, I see a lot of similarities between Kataoka and Kunitomo, but Kunitomo just has the more experience on his side. Them using wooden bats for practice, that's really cool. I'm like, Haruichi would be in heaven. And then Miyuki and Shunshin. I love that Shunshin's like, I couldn't sleep. I was so excited. I was like, I cannot express how much I feel for our boy Shunshin in these episodes. But let it be known, as I'd been excited about Mei and Miyuki teaming up this whole time, and I had forgotten about it at this point because I was like, Shunshin and Miyuki are just making an amazing battery. But let it be known that Mei approaches Miyuki. That's interesting. But then again, way back in episode 6 of season 1, Mei approached Miyuki, or Kazuya, to get him to join his team. I'm like, the fact that Mei is just like on a first name basis with Miyuki, and Itsuki's like, they're on a first name basis, what? Like, I feel like when we cut over to Itsuki, he had like all the symbols around his head, like the meme of him being like, why is he calling him by his first name? And it's like, but yeah, he wanted to have him catch for him. I feel like Mei wanted to show off to Miyuki, be like, you want to catch my balls, please? I want to show off to you. And Miyuki's like, I guess. All right. I love it. So meanwhile, we have Ono and Koshu catching for Sawamura at the same time that Furuya is pitching. I like we see Sawamura and Furuya practicing side by side. And I love that Sawamura is trying to get the number 11 pitch as good as he can. He's like, the god of war demands it. It's like, yes. He's like, I have to get number 11 solidified. And Yui comparing to Koshu. I like that while Sawamura and Furuya are battling out to be the ace, you have Koshu and Yui battling it out to be the catcher that could possibly replace Miyuki. That's really good. And I like how Yui is described as being straightforward in his desire to improve. I like that. It's kind of like a mix between Furuya and Sawamura. Sawamura is constantly trying to improve all the time, and Furuya is very straightforward in his desires. So Yui's kind of this weird mix between the two of them in how he's growing. It's interesting. So yeah, we established that June 21st is the lottery to figure out. So you're going to find out what teams are going to get the bracket on June 21st. And then July 5th is when it starts. So like a week and a half later. And so in 2 weeks, it's the end of May. So in 2 weeks, by mid-June, they're going to announce the roster for the team and be playing and practicing leading up to the lottery. That's going to go by so quickly. And I feel like the way I'm recording these episodes now, it's going to time up that as we're getting into the first game of the tournament, we're going to be getting into the end of the season. The timing's perfect. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better, right? So we find out who's going to make the roster and who's going to be the ace. I want it to be Sawamura so bad. I want it to be Sawamura, but Furuya's making a comeback, so I'm glad. I'm glad that Furuya's back on his feet by the end of episode 35, and that Sawamura's like, good, I'm going to face you at your best. Like, that's all I've wanted. I want Sawamura to get the ace position so badly, but at this point, I don't know. I just don't know. But yeah, that look, though, when Sawamura has the red fire and the purple eyes, it's such a weird look for him. We've never seen Sawamura with, like, the purple eyes. And just like that red fire, and Koshu's like, what the hell? And Sawamura's like, hungry. He wants it so badly. Oh. And then they end episode 34 with Miyuki returning. It's a narrative decision, right? That you have the guy coming back, and now we're going to spend the next couple episodes backtracking to see what we missed. Like, it's a narrative decision. It's fine. I'm like, I would have rather seen them get through the other games first, but he does come back in time to watch the other games. But that's okay. It's fine. So then we cut to episode 35, which has May 31st. Kawakami being in a good place. Kawakami, Zono, and Kuromochi like being the leaders in Miyuki's place while he's gone. I love it. They're picking up that role as well. At this point, they've won 18 games in a row. I feel like it's leading up because didn't Yakushi back at the last summer tournament, hadn't Yakushi won 20 or 21 episodes in a row when they started the summer tournament? Wasn't that the case? I feel like it was. I feel like it would be really cool, a nice little parallel if Sato going into the summer tournament were at 21 wins, 0 losses, just like Yakushi was going into the summer tournament. That would be really cool. It'd be a nice parallel. I'd really like that. And it would show how much the team's grown too, because last year it was not like that at all. They had some losses. So then the practice game and the tournament. So Miyuki, I like that he is basically, my handwriting gets awful at this point, but talking about Tetsu, was I about Tetsu playing them? Okay, so Miyuki, they're talking about like trying to perform while he's away. And so, okay, here's the thing. During the practice game, I like this idea that Kataoka, it's a free-for-all. Like, everybody, how you do in the moment matters. And so Kataoka is not afraid to, like, swap people out, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Tetsu! So, yeah, Miyuki was up against these batters. So they're playing some practice games before they play the American team. I didn't see Tetsu at all coming from a mile away. It did not register to me until the exact moment he showed up. And it was like did not register that before they faced the American team, they were going to have some warm-up games against other universities. Like, I was like, oh, they're playing against universities. Okay, all right, cool. And I look up and I'm like, there's Tetsu! just the fact that Miyuki, like, Tetsu's so proud. And he's like, I'm playing at a university now. And he's like, look at you, Miyuki. He's like, you've come up to be captain just like me, but now you're the catcher and cleanup. You're the 3 seed. Like Miyuki is embodying what Tetsu wanted him to become. And for him to get to play him while he's at his best, stop. Like, that's like the best fan service ever. What a surprise. I love it. And for Tetsu, and Tetsu just had to show him up, though, because even with Miyuki catching and Umemiya pitching, it was Umemiya pitching, he still gets the home run. Like, oh. But they talk about how good of a batter Miyuki is. And Shirakawa has been keeping track of how many home runs Miyuki's been getting. I'm like, Shirakawa, are you tsundere? Why are you obsessing over Miyuki? What's the deal? I feel like Shirakawa is always obsessed over Miyuki for whatever reason. But he's had 37 home runs, and Carlos is like, you're really keeping up with this record, huh? And then Mei is all smiles. Because Mei and Miyuki are very similar. They both love to be challenged. They love to play the best. And Miyuki's like, I want to play the best teams at the top of their game. And Mei's like, I want to compete against the best players at the top of their game. And so Miyuki and Mei, they're divas in their own right. I mean, Miyuki's not necessarily a diva, but they both have similar wants and desires to be challenged. So we get the American team talking, and I'll be honest, it's no free Iwatobi Swim Club. I joke, I kid. It's fine. You can definitely tell that the voice actors playing the American team are Japanese. You can definitely tell that they're either Japanese or they are not native English speakers, just by their inflection and the way that they talk. In Free Iwatobi Swim Club, if you've not watched that series, there is a moment when we get introduced to some American characters or some Australian characters that don't speak Japanese. They speak English. That's my point. And in that series, you can tell that they had English voice actors or actors that have English as a native language speaking for those characters. It's funny. It sounds kind of like Microsoft Sam, where it's like, hello, Rent, how are you at swimming? But it sounds like there's an English accent there. With these characters, you can definitely tell they're Japanese voice actors that are speaking in English, which is fine. It's just kind of like, I imagine it's what someone that's watching a dub in another language thinks when they hear it. They're like, oh, that sounds different. So you can kind of tell. But they call Umemiya Elvis, which is great. And they talk about Inui having a ducktail with his hair. I'm like, aw, that would be the U.S. equivalent. We would call it a ducktail. Yes. But they're basically talk about how they are facing off. They're kind of sizing up the competition. The American team is trying to size up the Japanese team and vice versa. And I like that Umemiya is like, don't look down on us. I'm like, okay, I like that little sparks forming between them. But yeah, Kataoka, there's no room for slip-ups. Like, as soon as two of the players aren't doing well in the infield, he's like, get them out, replace them with somebody else. And Koshu's like, man, that seems kind of harsh. But it's like, there is no room for error. This is the time that the roster's being built up. So it's like all hands on deck. And the third years, they make a point of saying the third years are a driving force, as they always are. I feel like with any team, your third years are the most experienced. They are going to be a driving force no matter what. Even if you have first and second year players that are better, the third year experience is still going to amount for something, right? But Kawashima and Koshu end up being a good battery, and they end up, as Miyuki returns, they've won their 19th game. And they still have 2 games to go, so I'm hoping they win both of those games and have like a 21-0 streak. I hope that's the case, right? But we cut to June 1st, the game at Sato. Koshu's like, Saomura's always sunny. And I'm like, yes, right? Always. Saomura is just a beam of sunlight. He just cannot be stopped. The Taurus energy radiating off of him is always there. But Ono being a starting catcher and Koshu wanting to catch for both Saomura and Furuya, I like that. And then we cut back to the Wind Youth Academy. I really like this. I like that they talk about how this youth academy, because it's really cool, right? They talk about how this youth academy was basically kind of like a local academy, a local school that formed this baseball team and is specifically for players who cannot afford or have the financial means to go to the really fancy universities. Because yeah, the US education system is different than Japan a lot. And so, yeah, there's lots of people that they just, unless they get a specific baseball scholarship, they can't afford to go to like a big major league team. They can't afford the tuition and the costs of it. So I like that in this LA team, I'm assuming it's based off a real team. I'm assuming it's based off something in reality. That there would be a team of people. It kind of reminded me of Kuramochi, that there's all these players who, like Kuramochi, have this intense passion for baseball. We don't know Kuramochi's family financial situation. We just know he gets a scholarship from Sato to go play there. But I'm assuming, and it's a high school, so it's different, right? It's a high school, so I'm assuming that getting into the high school at Sato is different than the system with the Wind Academy. And it's a high school as well, but it seems more like maybe a private school or non-for-profit school or a charter school. It seems more like a charter school maybe, and they've gotten in there on different merits. But I like the idea that these boys are all kind of like Kuramochi. They have an intense passion for baseball, but because of financial reasons or other means, they couldn't go to a specific academy or a different program. So this program was kind of started for them. I really like that. It provides them this free baseball resources. I like it. So Kunitomo talks about polishing and training, and that I like that Kunitomo establishes like it's good to have a rival. Having a rival polishes you and trains you and keeps you on your game and makes you the best player you can be. And it's like Saomura and Furuya are case in point with that. They are the perfect representations of that having that rivalry has made them better the last 2 years. And it will make you want to compete with honor. I'm like, yep, all for that. So they established that Inui is going to catch for game 1 and Miyuki is going to catch for game 2. We've only seen game 1 so far, so we will probably get a little bit, at least with Miyuki catching in the second game. And I like they established that Kunitomo specifically put different divisions together. He didn't let anybody from the same division play with one another. He intentionally made them play with people they weren't used to, because that will make you stronger. I like that a lot, right? Kunitomo's not a coddler. It's not his style at all. And so Miyuki's like, okay, it's my first time as a first baseman and my first time not catching in a game. And it's like, damn, Miyuki. I feel like Miyuki's pretty spoiled. He's never had to not catch in a game. Never had to play outfield or infield or anything. He's always been the catcher. Fascinating, right? But he's gung-ho about it. And I like the other players are like, man, for somebody that's playing a position they've never played before, he's really optimistic and all about it. Like Saomura. Saomura's like, I'll play any position. Just let me go. Let me help the team. And Miyuki has that same energy as Saomura. That's really cool. But yeah, we meet Anthony and M. Steven. I like it. M. Steven, it's great. They're for the U.S. team. And Shunshin is pitching. M. Steven gives off a very Zono vibe. He's like a bulkier player. He gives off a Zono vibe with his attitude. And I like that they established that the U.S. team, they are just bigger players. They're just bulkier. And so the way that their strike zone is designed is different than Japan as well. So there is a little bit of a learning curve there, right? But Shunshin pitching and saying, this is my last official game, so I can burn myself out. I want Shunshin to go pro so bad. I want him to, even if it's internationally, I want him to play in like an MLB, International League, something. I want Shunshin to keep playing because I love his character so much. And these set of episodes have reminded me how much I love his character. He's just wholesome. He just does the best that he can. And he's perfected his pitching. He's just such a great character. And I really loved him in all of these. And I love that Shunshin, he's like Miyuki and Mei. He loves the challenge too. He's like, I want to saw off their wooden bats. And he does with that one guy. But he's like, when he smiles, when Shunshin smiled, I'm like, what a contrast to season 1. Like, what? But Shunshin smiling and being like, I love it here. And here's the thing. His devotion to baseball, like everyone is noting how devoted Shunshin is to baseball and the fundamentals of it, the pragmatics of it, and just how devoted he is to just the sport in general. Even when he knows, that's what the reporters are like, he's never going to play a game for Japan after this, for this year. But he's still so devoted to it. It's like that level of commitment is so amazing, and like he gets everybody's respect. And the U.S. team thinks that Shunshin's the best pitcher. They're like, that's their best pitcher. And it's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, Mei's like, what would you say? But even Mei acknowledges that he's a perfect pitcher. So I'm like, might not be far off. But yeah, Umemiya, he's definitely the wild card on the team. But oddly enough, because he's the wild card on the team, he kind of has like a bonding moment with Shirakawa, which I was like, whoa, Shirakawa and Umemiya bonding? What is this? But it kind of makes sense. I like it. But they talk about the pitching strategies and they bond over it. It's great. Miyuki just sitting there. I love that Miyuki's sitting there being like, okay, guys, here's what we can do. Miyuki can't help but be a catcher and can't help but be a leader in this moment. Miyuki's like, Miyuki takes charge, right? He takes charge. And I love seeing Miyuki communicate with these other players. Whereas I feel like first year Miyuki and second year Miyuki would not nearly be like he is now. But God, Tetsu, the best decision ever made in this series may have been making Miyuki captain, because it's made him grow so much. And it just helped him as a player so much. And Mei is so much like Sawamura, just with this shit-eating grin, watching him being like, okay, Kazuya, yeah, let's do this. And I love that Miyuki's like, they came to our house to play. Like, they're on our turf. We've got the advantage. It's like, I just love it. And then Mei being like Sawamura, you're like, don't you guys love his personality? Like, you just shut up. The ex is in the house. And Shunshin being like, you feel like a bad guy, Miyuki. And Miyuki's like, what? But there's so many screenshots from this. But yeah, Mei just being like, don't you love his personality? Oh my God. And then this part floored me. Kunitomo smiling and praising Shunshin. Just being like, I'm amazed at you're such an ideal pitcher, Shunshin. And Mei's like, excuse me? I love that Mei's like, he's never smiled. Kunitomo's never smiled or praised me for 3 years, and he's known Shunshin for 48 hours and is already like calling him perfect. I'm like, seeing Kunitomo smile is possibly the most insane thing of this series. No neck crack in sight, because there's no pressure, right? It's just a training camp. We're not in an official game. But Kunitomo smiling, I was not prepared for that. I wasn't prepared a lot in these episodes. These episodes, there was a lot I was not prepared for. Just going in, I was just like, what's happening? But yeah, Shirakawa. And I love that Shirakawa did the bunt to just set Miyuki up. He did the bunt. He's like, okay, I sacrificed myself. We're in a clutch position. Prove yourself, Cap. It's like, ah! And I love that Mei's like, if you can't do this, Miyuki, why are you even here? I just love it. Miyuki's like, challenge accepted. Just throw my dick on the table. Let's do this. But I love that Koshu's establishing as having the eye of a catcher. And Sawamura makes note of that. He's like, you really pay attention to details. You're a lot like Miyuki. And Koshu's like, what did you notice, Sawamura? And Sawamura kind of picks up on the main details. But I like that we cut to Furuya. And Furuya has noticed things too. Furuya has been noticing just like Sawamura. I like that we get that comparison between them. And then Yui's been watching as well. So all these players, everybody's watching, taking notes, being observant, paying attention to strategy. Like, I like that we're getting into this like hardcore breaking down these games and how we're viewing the players and everything. It's all built up from season 1 to this. And if they do a season 4 animated, where we go to from here? But yeah, I like also that Furuya notices things and that Yui and Ono have helped Furuya get out of his shell. I like that a lot. I like that Furuya's communicating more, he's talking more, and we're seeing just how much of an impact Yui and Ono have had on him. That's so, so good. Also, I freaking love Nori and Ono as a battery. They're like the underrated players on the team. Kawakami and Ono have proven themselves so many times in this series, and they're so underrated. But I love that they form this battery of like no complaining. Let's just get the job done. No glory, all guts. I love it. I freaking love it. And then that ending scene where Sawamura's like, so Furuya, you're fine, right? Like last set of episodes, we ended with Sawamura throwing down the gauntlet being, I want you at your best. And here we tie back to that. And Sawamura's like, so are you at your best, Furuya? And Furuya's like, yeah. And he's like, good, don't self-destruct. I want to beat you fair and square. And it's like, yes, that's all I've wanted. I did not want an injury being the reason. If Sawamura becomes the ace, I want it to be because he's better than Furuya in this moment. I didn't want it to be because of like a pity win with an injury tied to it. And Sawamura's like, I love that Sawamura describes himself as a runaway train with no brakes. Yes. I love that he describes himself as that. He's like, I'm like a runaway train with no brakes. And everybody's like, that's the best analogy for you, right? There's no off switch to Sawamura's happiness. He's just a constant barrage, an assault, right? And I like that Koshu is like, he's like, should you be like taunting Furuya when he just got off of his second game, this is his second game coming back from an injury? Should you be like messing with him this much? And Tojo's like, that's just the way Sawamura cheers you on. That's just the way he cheers. I like the team has figured out how Sawamura works. I like they've all figured that out. But Sawamura's like, no, I know he can handle it because he's awesome. He's like, because he's Furuya and I want to beat him at his best. I like that we bookended this set of episodes with Furuya acknowledging Sawamura is awesome and Sawamura coming out and saying Furuya is awesome. It's just such a good rivalry. I freaking love it. It's amazing. It's great. So these episodes, I've like talked for an hour. These episodes, God, this whole this third season has been so good. But I wanted to end on talking a little bit about Haikyuu. So if you've not read the Haikyuu manga, there be Haikyuu manga spoilers abound. So just keep that in mind. But what I wanted to get at is the idea that throughout all of this, I mean, the idea is that at the end of the day, Sawamura has grown so much as a character. And season 1, he was built up in season 1 as being this loud, sunshine character that was gung-ho. And I will compare him a lot to Hinata from Haikyuu. But if I had one beef, and this is kind of why Ace of the Diamond sort of rises above Haikyuu for me as a sports anime at this point, is because, and it's a totally different scenario, right? In Haikyuu, Hinata was needed. They didn't have any other major, like other than Asahi and Daichi, they didn't really have any other major players as far as being, and middle blockers. They had Tsukishima, and that was pretty much it. So they didn't really have any other middle blockers. And so Hinata coming in with this talent to jump really high and be a middle blocker was important. But I feel like up until the third act, up until the end of the national tournament, Hinata struggles to have chemistry with Kageyama, and that becomes its own thing. But I don't feel like Hinata ever struggled like Sawamura with something like the Yips, or where Sawamura was potentially getting replaced by Furuya. Hinata never had that moment. Hinata was always the middle blocker. There was no question. He wasn't going to sit the bench. Hinata wasn't sitting the bench at any point in Haikyuu. He was needed. So it was like a necessity that he had to get better. But with Sawamura, he was benched. He was taken off. He had to fight and claw his way up. And I feel like for Haikyuu, Hinata as the protagonist never really had to claw his way up to the top like Sawamura has. And he's always had that competition with Kageyama, but it was a different type of competition than with Furuya. And if you've read the manga, you know that there's a point where Sawamura, and I'm sorry, not Sawamura, but I'm sorry, but Shoyo leaving the game against Kamamedai, it did cause them to lose. We can debate that as a Haikyuu reader all you want, but I really think it was the catalyst of them not winning. And that was just Shoyo not taking care of himself. And it's an amazing moment, and it's probably one of the most like down-to-earth poignant moment in the series with, you know, the instructor with Tanada and everything. But I feel like after that we cut to Sawamura and we're told how it's show versus tell is what I'm getting at. With Haikyuu in the manga, in the post-time skip with the manga, and it's not been animated yet, and the post-time skip's my favorite part of Haikyuu. It's the best. But I will concede and admit that we get told how Sawamura got better, and then we cut to him being better. We got Shoyo saying that he was going to get better, and then we cut to Shoyo being better, to Hinata being better, but we don't get to see it all take place. We just get like a montage of Shoyo getting better, and then he's like OP in that final match against the Adlers, and it's amazing, it's great, it's rewarding, but this is more rewarding because we have seen Sawamura at his worst, and we have been shown, not told, how he has rose his way back up through the ranks and clawed his way back up. And for me as a viewer, I love the final act of Haikyuu. Haikyuu has one of the best endings for manga I've read so far, and I love it. And I love Hinata's growth, and I love how he gets to that OP part. But it's not as rewarding as it has been with Sawamura at this point, because Hinata, we just get told that he gets better, and we get like a little montage, but we don't get to see him claw his way up like we do with Sawamura. The Ball Boy arc is probably the closest we get to Hinata clawing his way back, and that was still back in high school, and then we cut to like 6 years later, right? But I don't know, I went on a rant and ramble about that. My point is that at this point, I know why I like Ace of the Diamond as my favorite sports anime, because of the character growth and development, how natural it is, and how it makes you as the audience, you suffer with your protagonists, but then when they claw their way back up, it just is more rewarding. So yeah, that's my rant. But I love this series so much, and this was such an amazing set of episodes, but oh my gosh, y'all, I can't wait. So we'll do episodes 36, 37, 38 next. For those of you that stuck with me to the end here, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and reaction. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, but yeah, this was wonderful. I loved it. And so yeah, we'll pick up next time with the next 3 episodes and go from there. But in the meantime, I hope you all had a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episodes 36, 37, and 38 of Ace of the Diamond Act 2. Bye.